The F-4 Kurnass 2000 is a very late model upgrade of the F-4 Phantom used by Israel in War Thunder. Let's check it out. The F-4 Phantom entered service with Israel in 1969 and saw extensive combat during the 1970s and 80s. The Israelis called it the Kurnass, which means sledgehammer. The Phantom was quite successful in Israeli service, but it showed some vulnerabilities to modern SAM systems, and its maintenance cycle proved a bit troublesome. To overcome some of the issues that they discovered, and issues they anticipated might come up in some future conflicts, a program called Kurnass 2000 was set up to upgrade Israel's existing fleet of F-4Es with more modern systems and expand their operational lifespan quite a bit. During the Cold War period, the Israelis frequently showed themselves to have some amazing engineering talent in regards to upgrading and rebuilding foreign-built aircraft, and the Kurnass 2000 program once again validated that capability. The upgrade included an entirely new combat computer, structural reinforcements on the wings, a new wide-angle heads-up display, a better cockpit layout, some aerodynamic changes to improve dogfighting agility, and the new APG-76 radar set. The new version also had compatibility with the latest generation of weapons, including air-to-ground ordnance that wasn't compatible with the original Israeli Phantoms. This ended up being an important detail, as the Israeli Air Force had started flying the more modern F-15 and F-16s as their primary air defense fighters, with the Kurnass 2000 envisioned as a second line of defense, but also having value as an interdiction aircraft to perform ground attack missions without needing a dedicated fighter escort. Really, an overall multi-role weapons platform. The F-4 Kurnass 2000 entered service in 1989, flew in combat many times during the 1990s, and wasn't retired until 2004. What we get in War Thunder is the F-4E Kurnass 2000. This is a jet fighter in the Israeli air tree at rank 8 with a battle rating of 11.7. I want to give a disclaimer that some of the features on this aircraft's combat systems may change slightly, and there are a number of open bug reports at the moment. As of making this video, the plane gets a full ballistics computer for all of its air-to-ground weapons, an air target tracking radar-adjusted gun sight, a laser designator, and the AN APG-76 radar set. This radar set features regular lookup search mode, all-aspect pulse Doppler, ACM boresight targeting, and has a good variety of dish angles and range presets. For loadouts, the plane can take a huge selection of weapons over a large number of pylons. You can build a loadout for basically any mission, and you can even take additional countermeasure stations. For air-to-air weapons, you get two versions of the Sidewinder, the AIM-9G as your starter weapon, and the AIM-9L as an upgrade. The 9G is a medium-performance rear-aspect missile you've probably used by this point, and the 9L is, of course, the best Sidewinder currently in the game, with all-aspect tracking and 30 Gs of pull. For semi-active radar missiles, you get the AIM-7E2 and the AIM-7F. The E2 has a better thrust-to-weight ratio than the F, but the F has a longer engine burn and better range. The F also tracks slightly better, and it fires hot off the rail, while the E2 takes just under a second to start tracking, which can matter in head-on attacks. Both have 25 Gs of pull and are reasonably effective weapons, but the F is generally an upgrade over the E2. For air-to-ground weapons, you can take two different sizes of Paveway 2 laser-guided bombs, 4 of them either way, and they're both relatively effective. More on that later. You can also take the AIM-65D. This is an infrared-guided version of the Maverick anti-tank missile with great performance. The main advantage over the earlier Mavericks is that it can be used at night. The flight performance of the Kurnass 2000 is reasonably good, generally speaking, but there are a couple of considerations to know about, since this jet is going to get sucked up into BR-12 matches more often than not. First, despite having acceptably good engine power, it's still a heavy jet, and the thrust-to-weight ratio is notably lower than most other top-tier fighters, which is something that can matter quite a bit if somebody attacks you with even a small energy advantage, either in speed or in altitude. Now, it's still reasonably fast, but other top-tier jets will usually be able to beat it at low altitudes, both in acceleration and in top-end speed. It doesn't get any drop tanks, so if you get into one of the larger maps, you're going to want to keep an eye on your fuel. It's not going to be a huge problem as long as you maintain some basic throttle discipline, just don't forget about it entirely. The maneuverability of the jet is interesting. It's got a whole bunch of aerodynamic upgrades that give it better general overall agility than any other version of the F-4, and even its horizontal stabilizers on the tail have fixed leading-edge slats. The plane can manually deploy additional wing slats that are linked to your combat flaps, which can help improve energy retention and turn rate, but many of the other top-tier fighters can still outperform the Kurnass 2000 in a pure rate fight, and stuff like the MiG-29 or F-16 is going to have the advantage in a basic 1 or 2 circle flow. Still, it's quite an acceptable dogfighter, and it can handle itself in a furball. Just be aware of its lower thrust-to-weight ratio against other top-tier jets, and try to maintain an energy advantage whenever possible. If you get sucked into a slow-crawl rate fight under like 400 kilometers an hour, it's going to be a really bad day, and do your best not to get sucked into vertical scissors against a lighter opponent. Dogfighting with the Kurnass 2000 is a bit more about knowing what to avoid than anything else. Taking this jet into air battles is largely similar to other upgraded F-4 models, but keep in mind that it gets sucked into BR-12 more often than not. The Kurnass 2000 has some great features you can maximize with a little practice. First, it gets a huge weapons load with 8 missiles that you can mix and match with up to 4 of each, or 6 Sidewinders and 2 Sparrows, depending on your playstyle. You can also swap out 1 or 2 of the inner pylons for extra countermeasures, and my personal preferred loadout is 4 Sidewinders, 3 Sparrows, and 1 extra countermeasures dispenser. In air combat, I've had the best luck using a combination of medium-range missile shots and brawling into the furball. One-on-one turn-fight engagements against like F-16s and stuff won't usually end well, and as paradoxical as it might sound, the chaos of a larger fight can actually be a benefit, since your opponent can't just force you into a flat circle and wait patiently as they slowly gain angle on you. If you use the Kurnass 2000 for ground attack, you can use its bombs to take out 2 bases or an enormous number of AI ground targets. For my 5 cents though, after you've grinded the upgrades, just stick to air combat. If you fly this jet out as close air support, just keep in mind that the meta is really rough right now since the Pantier has been added, and you're going to need to dive to the deck or turn away immediately after spawning in, most of the time, just to get out of SAM range before you even think about any kind of attack. If you take the laser-guided bombs, you're forced into using the Pave Spike targeting pod, and for whatever reason, you can't use the plane's built-in laser designator. It does have one, you just can't use it for the laser-guided bombs. That may be fixed eventually. I've had the best luck using the LGBs or IR Mavericks from very high altitude to try and avoid radar detection by SPAA units. One thing to note, the laser targeting pod doesn't have thermals or an auto tracker, so for night battles, take the Mavericks if possible. Visually, the Kurnass 2000 looks like other versions of the F-4, only a little more badass. Those extra wing slats, the laser designator on the left wing root, and like those slats on the horizontal stabilizers and stuff, all make this plane look like some kind of an emergency battlefield upgrade or something, and for my money, it's probably the best looking Phantom in the game. It only gets 1 paint job, but the default Israeli camo's pretty good, so that's fine. Plus, it's got the usual smiley face on the tail. See? Look at that! It's so happy! And now that I've pointed it out, you'll never unsee it, so you're welcome. Landing the plane is pretty simple. You can drop gear and landing flaps a bit over 400 kilometers an hour, but just remember that this is a heavy jet, so don't hesitate to come in a little hot in order to avoid a short approach. It's got a drag chute that cuts down on the landing run, and overall, it's got a fairly routine landing profile for a large fighter. The cockpit of this jet is excellent. The visibility is basically the same as other Phantoms, but you've got a huge heads-up display, and the instrument panel has been completely redesigned. Everything is in a good, easy place, and really, the plane is very simple to fly in VR. To close out on the F-4E Kurnass 2000. This jet has a great radar set, carries an enormous overall payload of weapons, which includes plenty of multi-role options. Plus, it can take extra countermeasures. However, it's still a little heavy and has a lower thrust-to-weight ratio than most other non-Phantom jets that it's going to face in the top brackets. And it doesn't get an auto-tracker or thermals on the pave spike pod. The final verdict on the Kurnass 2000 is that this is, in my opinion, the best version of the F-4 Phantom in the game, and it's still competitive in top-tier air battles. Its multi-role loadouts also make it highly attractive for close air support. Truly a jack of all trades. As always, thanks for watching.